question 4, how did you use media technologies in the construction, research and planning and evaluation stages? So the first part of this is obviously Panasonic camera, essential obviously to making a film is the camera, and cinematography was very, very important to us. We've talked about it a lot and how so the way the film looked was a major sort of selling point of it, and so not only for narrative and for marketing purposes, we wanted to use a range of shots, and you know, a worse camera might have been a hindrance to this, but it absolutely allowed us to do everything we wanted to do. Obviously there's a tripod as well, which allows us to get the sort of range.
I think also it was quite important for the because basically throughout like the trailer we wanted to kind of suggest the narrative through our use of camera. So like quite a lot of the time we use low angles on our main protagonist to make him seem more powerful or more dominant, and we do the same with the boss character and the main antagonist. And we do kind of that throughout the whole trailer again to suggest the narrative.
Second section of our use of technology was the use of lighting equipment, and this is obviously very important to us because throughout our research and planning, the unique selling point that we wanted because of our influences like Welcome to the Punch and the Drive director, what's the guy's name? Nicholas Winding Refn. Yeah, those were our main influences, and they were so because of the way that they use colour and lighting and tone and the way they use those to suggest narrative. So within places in our trailer like the bar scene, we used one of these gels in front of one of the mains light in order to give it that blue wash, which really we thought worked well in suggesting isolation and sort of like a more intimate atmosphere in comparison to like the very harsh and bright lighting of the corridor and the meeting scene. And yeah, we also, with regards to lighting, not so much as equipment, but with regards to lighting, we chose areas in London which had bright lighting because of our wish to conform to our influences. So the shot on the bridge, the shot outside London Aquarium, both with purple lighting, and then the city centre where Gabriel was running, all of them have really vibrant colours, and yeah, I thought that was especially useful in our film.
Okay, so the third section of basically the hardware we used was the sound equipment. It was probably our like most troublesome area, I'd say, because none of us are particularly good at sound. But like we tried to overcome the obstacles by using pretty much every bit of sound equipment we had. So like condenser microphones, digital audio recorders, micro tracks, boom poles, road mics. So basically, when we did the AS task last year, we used very like minimal sound. We used like the directional mic and a micro track, and that was about it. But this year we wanted to kind of extend it and use kind of make our own ambient sound effectively. So for instance, when the transition between the moment when Gabriel goes into the room to find the guy dead, we actually recorded the sound of the gun cocking. We also recorded the sound of the footsteps leading up to the house, to the friend's house. We used we basically tried to extend our kind of our use of sound.
It was ambition and wanting to make a good piece, and part of it was necessity because you know to do what we wanted to do, to have dialogue. So particularly in our one, in our AS we only had a voiceover, which only required a micro track. But this year also we needed to use Rode mic in order to get sort of dialogue in scene. Obviously we had to dub some stuff, but a lot of it is actually from the set.
Yeah.
Which was necessary in order to actually have dialogue, which is something that is in a trailer, rather than just a voiceover. Which
I think also in terms of like the ambient sound, like in terms of the layering of sound, what we didn't do last year is that we had a very bleak background noise. Like obviously, if you're in a room, there is a room that noise had, a noise that room has, even if like it's not obvious. Like a completely plain sound when you're talking in a meeting room isn't going to work. So another thing that we did is that we used like
the roof sound.
We used the room sound. We recorded the room sound and layered it underneath the actual dialogue in order to give it like a more lifelike effect.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like there were lots of moments in the trailer where we had to kind of re-record the dialogue because the actual the ambient sound was too loud. But we basically just went up to a quiet room and recorded that separately, and it fitted quite nicely over the top. I think it works quite well in the end. I mean, the sound is probably our weakest area, I'd say, but I feel like we dealt with it the best we could.
Yeah.
Basically, in terms of like software for our sound, which we didn't actually use, but how our product used that was our music producer, one of my friends, his alias is Agile on SoundCloud, who produced the actual music for our trailer through like Logic and the Machine 2000 mixing desk, I think he said. And although there were a few problems with this, we found the music a little bit repetitive, and there wasn't enough of a progression from Act 1 to the montage, apart from the increased bass line. We thought that the music in our trailer worked quite well, actually. Don't you guys think so?
Definitely.
Yeah, and we found it really easy to sync because of the heavy bass drum and the like obvious changes in tone. But yeah.
I mean, SoundCloud in and of itself has been incredibly useful to us as a means of finding influences
And temporary.
and temporary sound, so that we could use something when we in our initial editing before we had the sound we ended up using. In our initial editing, we needed something to give us a sort of a beat and to give the trailer pace. And obviously we used SoundCloud for that, and we used it to look up influences, and you can embed SoundCloud onto Blogger, which is obviously where all our blogs are. So SoundCloud as a resource and as a website has been incredibly useful to us in and of itself, as well as being the main place where our music producer works.
I think it's also important to say that like the main soundtrack and like the sound that goes on in the background of a trailer is probably the most important thing, because it gives it rhythm, it gives it something which the audience can kind of.
Yeah, I mean, we personally found out how hard it was to edit without that sound.
Yeah.
Like the amount that we had to change from not having background music to having the background music, the timing of shots, the order of shots. So.
Well, I think that's especially true for our genre as well. I think our genre, the thriller genre, especially crime thriller and sort of modern crime thrillers, they absolutely need this sort of pace going through it.
Yeah.
Whereas if we'd done a romance, it might not have needed that. If we'd done, horror films often have that sort of discordant sound. But for our genre, we absolutely needed that, and we got it, which is good. So Final Cut. We use Final Cut Pro X as our editing software for the project. It's proven incredibly useful. It's fairly intuitive software, and other than in our AS production, we had very little to no expertise in the software. So it's been a blessing, really. Where originally we might have just been using sort of trims and stuff in our AS project, where we've got the ropes, and it's we're using shortcuts a lot, and the blade tool is really useful for getting it really sort of trimmed down, making the trailer look absolutely as slick as it can. One of the key things about Final Cut, one of the key features that we used is the colour match feature, whereby you can match one shot and then select a shot you want to give it sort of the colour of. And for a project that's so based on colour like ours, really that's been invaluable. And I think it's allowed us to get sort of the vibrancy and also the consistency that we wanted. So where we want certain shots to be a certain colour and certain other shots to be another colour, and it allowed us to denote both settings. So it allowed us to differentiate between, say, the bar and the friend's house. Really usefully to, the green and the sort of paler blues in the friend's house compared to the sort of deep dark blues of the bar, and then they're right next to each other. And I think without the colour match and without actually our use of lighting as well, obviously has been played a big role in that. But without our sort of control of colour that Final Cut gave us, it might have been more difficult to tell between sets and more difficult for us to denote tone and create what I think is quite a dramatic trailer. I think we've kind of nailed it there.
I think as well it's important to say that we used Final Cut not just in the trailer, we used it in the evaluations as well. We used with the director's commentary in the question 2, where we used the split screen idea. So we transformed the images and moved them so we could.
Which was totally new to us. We never sort of played with that before, because obviously that doesn't really play into the the genre or the sort of form of a trailer, which is all we've been working on really. This will be edited in Final Cut, although this will be more straightforward than the film or the split screen, which took a long time. But it's allowed us to do everything we wanted to.
Okay, so Photoshop. It's something over the 2 years, especially this year, we've used an increasingly large amount. We use it a lot, especially for the ancillary tasks, the magazine and the poster. We used it completely for that. Apart from when we took the photos and then we uploaded them into a raw format on Photoshop and then manipulated it. Like for instance, Joe on his, he used the the spot removal tool. He even made our lead protagonist have a beard.
I also used very briefly Illustrator, which is from the same Adobe package, to create the logo for my magazine. But and the sort of synergy between the two, Photoshop and Illustrator, made it so easy to just sort of move that from one place to another. Photoshop's a great tool in terms of being able to first manipulate the images in raw form and then and then essentially do whatever we wanted to them. Really, we've come on leaps and bounds from where we were at the beginning of the year, which was with fairly minimal knowledge of Photoshop, to the extent that we're now for this question, we're making that you'll see above this video. There's that sort of advert style thing, which we thought was a good way to both sort of give an overview of all the technology we've used and also use Photoshop again, which has been pretty much essential to certainly the ancillary task has been the essential thing.
I think it's as well essential to mention like the layering as well in Photoshop. Yeah. The amount of different layers we used. I mean, I personally must have used about 50 to 60 layers, and I'm sure these guys use the same. Because I mean, for instance, on my poster, on the title, and between the lines of all three of our posters, we must have used multiple layers to actually put the picture of Gabriel holding the gun, especially on our poster, in front of the lines. And I also did that on my poster on the title, the Two Evil section, where we put the bar scene in there again to kind of provide that link between the trailer and the poster.
An immense amount of work went into the ancillary tasks, but it would have been a whole lot more work if we didn't have Photoshop, because it's just got, you know, it's designed for professionals. It's got all the tools you need to create a professional looking thing. And if we've been using, I don't really know what else there is on the market. Photoshop's obviously dominant in the market, but if we've been using something less effective, then it would have been, you know, a vast amount of work to get anything done. Especially in terms of, you know, all the layering that went on, all the filtering and colouring.
Yeah, the colouring is something I want to mention as well, because we all use colouring on our poster and magazine cover too. Basically, we use like saturation. I personally use colour balance quite a lot so then especially with the main image of Gabriel, because we took it at quite like a bright kind of standout background.
Yeah.
It looked a bit weird on the poster cover, quite like when we first put it in, but then due to the fact that we learned how to change the colour and like the colour balance, the saturation, we actually it eventually looked like it fitted with the poster, which we could have done without Photoshop. So
this year we actually used motion a lot less than I personally did last year. I'm not sure about these two because we had separate groups, but last year I used motion to put the actors' names on as we were doing the 2-minute film opening, and usually you almost always have the actors' names inside the first 2 minutes of the film opening. Whereas in a trailer, they usually either come on a black screen or on the final slate, and if they don't come on either of those, then they don't come at all. So we didn't actually feel a need to use motion, apart from possibly in the use of narrative, in the making of narrative graphics. However, I personally am more skilled in these two products in the making of things like narrative graphics, which is Sony Vegas and Adobe After Effects. And basically how that's done is the effects are made using the various like generators in After Effects, such as particle generators, lens flares and things like that, where I'd colorize and manipulate what I was making, and then add them into Sony Vegas with a like transparent text thing that I made in Photoshop and lay them underneath the transparent text so they would come through, and then add more stocks that I made in Adobe After Effects over the top of that to give it that real blue flare with like the blue rain coming down, but inside it's got a sort of more Well, what I did is I tried to make it look like a police light. So you've got like the blue lens flares going on, and you've got the solar flares going across the middle. So yeah, that was how we made narrative graphics, and I actually think they worked really well, especially with the title, because you have how it sort of it's the exact same colour and tone as some of the shots in our film. Like if you look at the narrative graphics, then you look at the shot of the London Eye, or if you look at the narrative graphics and you look at the shot of Gabriel next to the aquarium with the purple lighting in the background, it all really like works towards us working towards our influences, but also in making our own product. It kind of really set the tone for our entire film.
I think it also worked. It also worked really well with the sound as well. The way like the sound of like the soundtrack began to slow down, and the title came up quite slowly as well. And I felt it kind of there was this big climax building, and then it kind of got to that point, and it kind of was. I felt it was like quite emotive, personally, which I thought was good.
Yeah, it was a strong way to end the trailer. I think
Yeah.
was with that sort of fade out, and that's the thing you see in quite a lot of recent film trailers. You see the sort of fade out and sort of slightly discordant, almost horror.
Like the ambiguous ending kind of
ending, and it's sort of rather than having this sort of big punchy ending, which an audience can actually forget, it has this sort of lingering effect that leaves the audience thinking about it for a little while afterwards, and that sort of can have a pretty profound effect, I think.
Okay, so social media. This is something we didn't use at all at the AS level last year, did we?
Not really.
Well, I say didn't use at all. We didn't use Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at all really last year. But we felt this year that it would be good to use them because obviously we've been learning about postmodernism and Web 2.0, and we realised the importance of these softwares, that kind of reaching an audience and creating that niche audience and all that. Kind of like the audience stuff, which is extremely important to us because obviously it's the most important thing to a film. So we used Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to basically promote all three of our media packages. Like we put pictures of our ancillary tasks and videos of our trailer on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Obviously, Instagram we put we put more kind of photos on, whereas Facebook we put videos on, and Twitter we put links to Facebook and Instagram effectively. So it could kind of, again, we wanted to create that kind of synergy between all three products effectively. Facebook and Instagram were especially useful for the evaluation question, the second one about, the third one about audience, because we put up our final trailer onto Facebook and asked people to comment what they think, like it, all that kind of stuff, which then kind of again helped us understand our audience more, to go along with all the surveys that we did at the audience screening, and we also put up our surveys on Facebook so the audiences could so we could generate more kind of audience responses, which would be good for our audience feedback.
I also think with Facebook, it's really useful because when you're doing audience screenings and things like that, as we have in our evaluation question 3 in school, you only really get certain age groups. You get the students who are in the 15 to 18, 15 to 19, but you don't get that 20 to 24 or the age group above that, the 25 to 30, whereas if we're sharing on social media, Instagram, Facebook, I think the three of us combined had something like 500 followers on Instagram or something like that, so so that reaches a lot wider range, and that gives us that sort of that depth of audience research. We're not limited to the age ranges that we have around us. We're not limited to teachers and students. We can have university students, we can have people who are working.
Yeah, I mean, because we all have followers that are from all different ages, like age groups, and we found when we first did our audience research in the research and planning stage that there was a kind of older, kind of 40-year-old kind of group that actually liked our style of film. So putting it on Facebook allowed older and obviously Instagram allowed these older audiences, as Joe said, to actually view our trailer and our products effectively.
Yeah, it's true of our ancillary tasks as well. Is we use social media to get sort of feedback on those, especially, and actually that helped us in choosing which ancillary task, which of our three productions we were going to actually go forward with, because that was quite a difficult decision for us, I think. So Vlogger is the sort of Vlog's the final social media that we used essentially. Probably the most key, not in terms of audience feedback necessarily, or about sort of social aspect of social media, but it's where the all-important blog is housed, and it's where all our research and planning and evaluation and everything, all the time we talk about construction, everything is there. That's our sort of explorative medium as sort of our mode of presentation, if you will.
Okay, so another software we used was Prezi, which we used especially to talk about the ancillary tasks in the evaluation. And effectively, Prezi is just a kind of, in our opinion, it's a nicer and smoother PowerPoint. Effectively, although we're using a PowerPoint here, it's a nicer version of PowerPoint, as it's slick, it's clean, it looks good. We used it a lot for our audience research in the research and planning stage. We made a massive Prezi about all of our audience research, and we just use it as another form of like presenting the information that wasn't just put on the blog for you to read effectively. It was just a nicer, cleaner presentation that we can use.